Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we talk about the intersection of pop culture and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, the creator of Out of Frame on YouTube and the creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education, joined as usual in studio by Mr. Paul Nelson.
Finally, we're back.
Finally, you're right. Finally, it is actually finally because I was out. You were out before that.
A month and a half.
It's been like a month and a half. Yeah, it's actually been a while. And then, of course, Jen Mafsanti on the screen right over here next to me. Hey, Jen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Can we talk about the wig?
Yes, yeah. I have a little bit more hair than usual today.
For those who can't see this, Jen is wearing a long. What do you call the dark roots?
It's a long
curly wig.
Effect.
Curly wig that has
ombre.
Ombre.
Okay, we'll just move on.
I don't know. Ombre. I don't know. Look,
it gradually lightens from brown at the top to blonde at the tips.
That's right, so. And it's a very luxurious wig that Jen is wearing.
It is
for reasons.
Why
are you wearing this wig?
Because we are filming a video here in Utah with the Libertas crew. It's I say a video like it's some rinky-dink production. No, this is actually more like a short movie. And I have a role. I have a speaking part in this film, and we're filming my scene today. So I'm in full makeup. I got the wig on. It's going to be an adventure. Keep your eyes peeled, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
I'll let you know when it premieres, but right now we're still shooting. So
for that reason, I am going to actually try to keep this show to an hour. I'm pretty bad at doing that most of the time, but I will try. I'm going to be real sensitive to the time. So like once we hit like the 40-minute mark, I'm going to start really trying to wrap it up. So forgive me if anything in this episode feels a little rushed once we get to the end, but especially given our
works for the movie.
It works for the movie. So especially given the subject matter, which is going to be talking about Dune, which I would argue feels a little rushed, but we'll get into that in a minute.
Oh yeah.
But first, before we do that, obviously a whole bunch of stuff we haven't talked about in a while. I mentioned right before we started that I'm I wouldn't say I'm in the middle. I'm in book 2 of Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series, enjoying that, continuing on with my Brandon Sanderson theme. But along with the Brandon Sanderson theme, at least to some extent, is new Wheel of Time trailers have
seem to be coming every week.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them now, and it just feels like they're really ramping up their promotion before they drop the show. When's the show actually start?
November 19th, correct, Jen?
November 19th.
I thought it was the 11th.
Oh boy.
Roughly soon.
Possibly sooner. So soon, in any case.
Soon.
My wife, enormous Wheel of Time fan. I have never read it. I don't know anything about it. I mean, I know
there's a wheel and time.
Yeah, that didn't help a whole lot, but I know there's magic. There's the stuff that happens. I also know that it is way too many books for me to start reading right now and expect to understand anything about the world before the show comes out. So I'm just going to go with the show and then probably sit there and listen as my wife tells me everything that's wrong with it.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure will happen.
Yeah, so, my husband has already assumed the brace position for that experience as well. So
it's sometimes it's all you can do. I mean, look, she had to tolerate this with me and Dune because I immersed myself in Dune for like a month and a half. So I'm, pretty familiar with Dune. And
still getting the sand out of every crevice.
It's still pouring out, man. Anyway, what do you guys think of the trailers so far? Being more experts on the subject matter.
We'll see.
That was a tepid.
I'm concerned. I have very real concerns. I said before that I got very strong CW vibes from the trailer.
That's just the worst thing I could possibly hear you say.
And I maintain that.
Wow. I really can't think of a network
But
that has ruined more beloved like fantasy and like comic properties than the CW.
I can't tell you the last time I've ever watched a show on the CW, so I just don't know.
I mean, I've watched. I mean, unfortunately, just because of what I enjoy and what I want to be good, like I give so much of their stuff a chance. I mean, from obviously Arrow and Flash and Supergirl and all that kind of stuff. Stargirl, which started on the DC Universe app, moved to the CW. Fortunately, it's not been like fully wrecked by the CW yet. It wasn't ever like the best of the stuff that came out of that, but I think I think that is the operative word, is yet, really. Like, you just know the CW can handle at most one season, maybe 1.5, before historically every single thing that they have touched has just gone into the tank. And it's just been, I don't know. So if you're telling me that about, and also the CW does stuff like their Riverdale stuff, which I'm just like, what are you doing, guys? Like, it's so weird. Don't do Riverdale. That's not a good idea. But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully it's not that. I'm holding out hope that it's not that.
I have the story stuff. I am expecting to be hit over the head with 2021 politics. I mean, bikes go into pretty much every piece of content nowadays with that.
Yeah.
But my biggest concerns are just production choices. And
well, yeah, because you were talking about how you just felt like everything was like very clean and like
too clean. And I understand that this world is supposed to be very vibrant. It's supposed to be the opposite of Game of Thrones, where everything's just terrible. But it still needs to be grounded in reality.
Yeah.
And I think some of the choices they're making, it just gets away from it, and it just makes it look. It looks like sometimes it looks like a CW show. But I can tell that they're making iterations in each trailer.
Yeah.
From the latest trailer, from the first trailer, they've tweaked lighting in the same scenes, which the way they shot it, you can do it with the cameras that they're using.
Right.
But it's getting closer. It's better. But yeah, some of the choices there kind of make me go, huh? I mean, they put a lot of money into this. Apparently, Amazon built an entirely new state-of-the-art studio named after Robert Jordan.
Really?
To film this. Huh. So they're kind of all in.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, hopefully it works.
I mean, look, if you're going to go all in on something, like the fact that this is like one of the biggest fantasy series of all time, and that it's got what conservatively 937 books associated with it,
roughly
at this point, about that. Then so you got a lot of material you're not going to run into a George R.R. Martin situation where you get to the end and you're like, oh no, what do we do?
No.
Wreck that too. Just wreck it. But speaking of the man who ended the Wheel of Time series, I mentioned Robert Jordan, but also Mr. Brandon Sanderson, who I'm reading. Jen, I heard you have some Brandon Sanderson related news, since you're like a mile away from where he lives or whatever.
I am out in his neck of the woods these days, and first of all, I am attending his sort of mini con next month, and that'll be a ton of fun. There's a new book release happening. I get an autographed copy. I get to go to Q&As with all kinds of fun people. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I also invited to his like small group creative writing class at BYU, the 15-person 1 year like intensive writing workshop that he does in conjunction with his lecture class. And I have not heard back yet from my application, but it's been less than a week since it was due. So I'm sure they have about a bajillion applications to go through. So
Probably.
We'll see how it goes.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I finished The Wheel of Time, but I am now listening to a sequel book written by Robert Jordan called A New Spring. And so Brandon Sanderson finished the last 3 books of the Wheel of Time series. I loved them. And so now going back and reading something by Robert Jordan, I'm kind of faced with the fact that Brandon Sanderson is just a better writer. And it is, I am struggling getting through this book, and I'm kind of reminding myself of kind of latter books that Robert Jordan wrote. And this feels like blasphemy to me a little bit, but I'm just, it's
well, this is
pretty obvious.
I'm very picky about this kind of stuff. I don't, there's a couple things. One, I don't have a lot of time for this kind of stuff, and in particular, like fantasy and science fiction, while it is entirely my wheelhouse, like committing to a book or an audiobook, which is mostly what I do now because I spend so much time in the car still. It can be a really big commitment, and to do that in exchange for time I might spend actually creating stuff or writing or like watching movies or other things that I actually care about, like it's a tall order. I've been through the entire Stormlight series, and like I said, I'm like just embarking. I'm on book 2 of the Mistborn series, and they're just constant reminders of how great a writer Sanderson is in throughout every book that I've read. Like there are or listened to. I mean, like in the car on the way over here, he was talking about a character who I love this anyway because the character is actually fairly complex. So she has mixed feelings about wearing dresses. She doesn't come from an environment where that's normal for her, and she had a moment where she did that a lot. She's not doing it now, and she got taken to a dressmaker because she was going to go meet somebody very important the next day. And this little subtle things, like Sanderson was describing the way that she felt about liking wearing the dress, and he described the dress as traitorous, which I thought was just a really subtle, sort of brilliant thing of like this traitorous garment of clothing.
Yeah.
Which of course, but it's that kind of stuff all the time where it's like Sanderson is really good at big picture stuff and really good at like providing a sense of movement and direction to your story, but he's also really good at the fine detail stuff. Like there's a lot of little subtle things throughout that I really, really like. So I'm glad to hear that. But I haven't read any Robert Jordan, so I don't really have a comparison.
Yeah. I mean, the first books of Wheel of Time series are fantastic. I think a lot of people would agree, from what I've understand, that there's a few books in the middle that are just pretty weak.
Yeah.
The slog.
The slog has been termed.
That's
is
what the fans call it.
It's true.
Like all of the fan groups are like, "Oh, you're in the slog. Sorry about it."
Well, I mean, honestly, it works that way with TV shows sometimes. I mean, there are quite a lot of shows over the years that I've recommended to people, and then you gotta like recommend it with the caveat that like season 3 and part of 4,
not great.
You're just you're gonna get some important stuff out of there, but you want to just maybe if you're really hating it, do the first couple episodes, then do like sweeps week, and then the last couple skip all the filler. Mm-hmm. I've made that recommendation before. Like you got to do that sometimes. Yep. But
sometimes.
On that note, and this is going to be an interesting segue, because I just spoiling this, I like Dune in general. I also immersed myself in the world of Dune prior to watching Dune. But Dune does skip some stuff, and it does have some moments in it that are like that. So without further ado, let's talk about Dune. This is, of course, not David Lynch's Dune from 1983 or 84. It is Denis Villeneuve's Dune from right now, which is out on the Max and in theaters, and you can see it. It's a 2.5-hour part 1, which I actually discovered from doing the Out of Frame episode on Dune, that a lot of people did not know that it was part 1. A lot of people were actually expecting it to be a complete story, which is interesting.
I kind of knew it, but they weren't marketing it as a part 1.
Yeah, I'm kind of intrigued by that choice. I guess it was probably an intentional choice. They probably figured that people wouldn't go just watch part 1.
Yeah, well, the way they ended it.
Which maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not really sure. But that's actually been kind of an interesting thing. Like, this is actually an interesting episode for us to do as a podcast for me, because I've already got an Out of Frame episode about the subject material. So, which, by the way, if you haven't watched that, go check it out. But it's given me some insight on what people's reaction to Dune, which is kind of interesting. I also put a poll on YouTube and asked people, to rate, like, basically 1 to 5, like, whether or not they liked Dune. The majority liked it. It's not like a overwhelming, like, 95%, right, but it's like I don't know, I think maybe 70-ish% on the, mostly liked it to, like, extremely liked it side of things. So we'll see. But without spoiling my thoughts too much, what were you guys' initial reactions? Let's start with Jen, because I kind of know what Paul's is.
All right. So y'all know that I have been looking forward to this movie for over a year now. Like, I've just been let it begin for months. And I was not let down. It was a gorgeous film. And, like, I've read the book. I know that this is a really, really difficult source material to adapt into film. Okay? It's never going to please everybody. And so much of what happens in the story is extremely internal to the characters. It's their observations, their thoughts, feelings, and that is very, very difficult to translate to the screen.
Well, and obviously a very big problem with the David Lynch movie, I'll say in my opinion, although I feel like it's in nearly everybody's opinion, is that so much of that movie is inner monologue narrated while somebody kind of stares into the middle distance on camera. It's a very weird way of doing that. But to your point, like, a lot of it is because the book details people's thoughts and feelings in a very literal way. Like, Frank Herbert will literally just write, and then Jessica sat thinking this, and this. Like, she thought, oh, Paul has grown into such an effective leader, or whatever. Or, wow, Leto, they do that kind of stuff in the book a lot. Herbert does a lot of that stuff in the book. And so that's really hard to translate, for sure. Obviously, it's also a very complicated sort of political situation that has a lot of key players, a lot of ins and outs,
Yeah.
So, it's tricky. There are a few things that I wish that they'd set up better. Wish that they'd made relationship between Leto and Jessica a little bit more robust, because that is actually a very robust relationship that the two of them have. And I wish that they'd done a little bit more to sort of show true villainy of Harkonnen, Baron Harkonnen, because he's a terrible person. Like, he's just super awful.
Also, there's stuff that, like, I kind of get why you would omit, but, like, he's like a rapey pedophile in the book as well. Like,
fun.
He's really bad. Like, he's really, really bad.
He's
constantly. I was going to say, he's constantly playing games with people, which is something you also don't really get from this movie. Like, he is. I don't want to call him jovial, but he has like a sadistic aspect to him where he likes, like, pitting people against each other or playing games with people's motivations and what they want and things like that. And so, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff with, like, Piter de Vries, who is unfortunately very briefly in this movie, not nearly as much of a character as he probably should have been. And he spends a lot of time, like, toying with him and, like, trying to, like, manipulate him, which is fun for him it's fun for the Baron, because Piter is this mentat who's supposed to be ultra smart and logical and has, you know, just incredible mental powers, right? And so the idea that Baron Harkonnen can manipulate him and like trick him or whatever, or just play these games with him, is, you know, very clearly something that makes him feel, you know, extremely powerful, right? Because he's playing with this mentat, and
I think
you don't get a lot of that.
Not setting up that villainy of Baron Harkonnen, it makes the Emperor's decision to back Harkonnen instead of Atreides, like,
It's kind of strange,
fall
right?
a little flat. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Although
just,
we're not supposed to know that yet in this movie. I don't think.
They say it.
well, they do say it.
Well, they do.
Yeah.
They do, but it's like, it's weird. Like you really shouldn't know that until kind of. Well, that's not entirely true, because again, Frank Herbert just tells you literally every piece of information you would ever need to know about the story. So you know, like you know, like whenever you're in any of the scenes with the Baron, like you know exactly what he's thinking, you know exactly what went into that. Like this is part of why this is a really hard movie to do the right way. And some of that is just purely the source material. I don't, you know, Paul. Well, let me.
Do we want to do a synopsis or?
Yeah, I'll do a little synopsis in a minute, but I want your initial reactions as well, because.
So I have a lot to say about this movie, and not really anything positive. Well, I'll start with something positive. The one thing that I enjoyed about this movie is that the main character name was Paul.
Yeah, well, there you go.
You just don't get that a lot nowadays. So as a Paul myself, I really enjoyed seeing that on the big screen for the first
representation.
Finally,
Paul,
for the first time.
Yeah,
I don't remember a movie that has Paul. Besides one of the most important stories of human history. Other than that.
Yeah, but I can't think of too many movies where that's
right.
Last Temptation of Christ possibly has a Paul.
Maybe, but he'd be a side character in that one.
Would be a side character.
So
in that most important story, always a side character. That's unfortunately.
So yeah. Power to the Pauls.
Okay, well, all right. I'll do a little synopsis. This is really hard. I've had a lot of time to think about how to condense Dune, but the gist of Dune, which is not something you really want to be tackling here, but like the gist of Dune is basically that we live in a world where there is an imperial system. One emperor controls basically every planet in the galaxy or the universe, whatever. This is also like 20,000 years in the future. It's way, 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 way in the future of humanity. And there's a planet called Arrakis that has a substance that can be mined from the desert called the spice melange. It has all kinds of really important properties. It allows people to sort of see into the future and see through space-time, and this does many things for many different people. It's also basically just a drug and a euphoric sort of experience for people. But maybe more importantly than that, it allows a group of sort of spice-infused, like evolved human. They're not even humanoids anymore. The book describes them as fish-like, actually. But they're called navigators, and basically they use spice to see a pathway through space and time so that they can use the technology that they do have to fold space and go from one point to another around the universe. And so this is an incredibly important and incredibly valuable thing. It only exists on this one planet, and as we are entered into the story, the Baron Harkonnen and House Harkonnen group, like his house, has controlled that planet for many, many years, and the Emperor has just removed him from power and instead installed Leto Atreides and the Atreides family to go take over management, like feudal lordship of this planet. And so a lot of the book and a lot of the movie is really about like the political machinations of like them getting on the planet, figuring their way around everything, and then slowly realizing that the Harkonnens left them tons and tons of traps, and like they have spies, and they're just like the Harkonnens are really like trying to destroy them. Actually, it's a long-standing feud between the two houses, but like, so a lot of it is about that, and a lot of it is about the sort of unfolding mystery of the spice and unfolding mystery of like the people who live in the desert, who are known as the Fremen. It's really complicated, but like the gist of the story is these guys come to a planet for the first time. They leave their homeworld. They move here, become the lords of a planet that is just a dangerous, incredibly hostile world. And they have to deal with, the planet's hostilities and the political intrigue at the same time. That's like the best way I can set it up. Everything else, I'd have to go into pretty detailed explanations. I mean, there's the Bene Gesserit, who are like sort of a religious sect of like kind of witches. It's really hard to describe.
Jedi,
yeah, it's, to some extent they have mind powers more than have like whatever telekinetic powers or anything. But anyway, there are them. There's mentats who use a different substance to help encourage their.
Is that the one with the eyes that roll back in their heads?
Yes, yeah, those are those people. You don't really get a whole lot of setup.
No explanation. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, they're basically human computers.
Okay, that would have been helpful to know.
Yeah. Obviously, and this is something that I don't remember if the movie explains or not, but like thousands of years ago, after a war that involved artificial intelligence and robots and stuff, they decided that they would never again have a machine that could match the intelligence of a human. And so they outlawed that thousands of years ago. And so, in part, so that they could, they wanted to, part of the fallout from that was that they wanted to make humans capable of doing the same things that, they never wanted a human to become weak and reliant on technology, basically. So now enter Paul, right? Let's talk about Paul Atreides for a minute. Because Paul is, although it's not fully explained in the movie, Paul is exceptionally well trained in fighting. He is exceptionally well trained in diplomacy and politics and history. He is an avid reader and very curious person. He has been trained to be a mentat. He has not gone through the final sort of tests and whatever to become a mentat, but he's been trained his entire life to be capable of doing that. So he's got incredible mental acuity already. His mother is a Bene Gesserit, so he has been trained in their ways. He knows a lot of their lore and their history, and also is learning how to do this sort of mind-controlling voice manipulation thing that they do.
Jedi mind trick.
The Jedi mind trick. Yeah, absolutely. My goodness. I mean, he's a decent pilot. Like, you just name a thing, and Paul has been trained or prepared to be the thing, and he's 15 years old, and so he is just out of control powerful already, just right out of the gate. Yeah. But he doesn't have that much of a personality. That's true in the book as well, I would argue.
Which is fine. I mean, you look at better movies like Star Wars, Luke Skywalker doesn't have much of a personality, but
at first,
but he kind of grows into it. So I think the character
his personality is whiny.
Yeah, there you go. Just want some
Peru.
Just want some blue milk
Peru.
And some cookies, and go to the Tashi station.
That's right. He's gonna go and pick up some power converters after.
If
all.
Only.
Ugh, couldn't do it.
So this I know we've gotten. You called him a Gary Stew in the
I
episode.
did. And people got mad at me for calling him, and I qualified. This is a bit of a Gary Stew. I didn't say he's like full on Gary Stew, and then everybody was like, "Well, but he trained to be." Except for you never see him train. I mean, that's not entirely true. You see him doing some fighting and stuff like that, but he's already very, very good.
And I guess it makes sense in context with, of course, Prince, basically.
Yeah, he's a prince.
Who's been they've been genetically modifying, it seems like, their DNA to get to this point.
Yeah, so this is another like bit of complexity that you really, I mean, again, this is a very complex story. So the Bene Gesserit are often consorts to powerful people, and part of what the Bene Gesserit do is selectively decide what sort of bloodlines to bear which children. Also, the Bene Gesserit can choose the sex of the babies that they have. Lots of powers. So, so they've been very carefully sort of doing this. And Jessica is Paul's mother, consort to Duke Leto Atreides. And she was not supposed to have a son, but she chose to have a son instead. In part because that's what Leto wanted, or that's just something that she thought would make him happy, and she does actually care for him, which, again, we can talk about in the movie, whether or not you get some of this. But also because there's this sort of prophecy for the Bene Gesserit of the Kwisatz Haderach, which is like a male version of the Bene Gesserit order. So it's like a man who can do all of the things that their highest, their reverend mothers can do. The only way to test that, by the way, is to put the men in. Well, at first, they do a test that involves extreme pain, which comes up in the book and in the movie. But later, and this is spoiling part 2 probably, the real test is having to drink a substance called the water of life, which literally is just poison, and you either die or you live, and no one's ever survived. So.
No male has ever survived?
No male has ever survived. Correct. Yes. So.
Cool.
Paul will, at some point, get horribly poisoned, and we'll see how that goes for Paul.
I'm sure he'll be fine. I guess I'll go first. Because Jen and Sean, I think fair to say you guys both like the movie. You guys are definitely deeper into the lore of Dune than I certainly am.
I mean, obviously, I can fill in a lot of gaps.
Yeah. So for me, this is one of the most frustrating movies I have seen in a long time. And it's frustrating because of the talent that was involved in making this movie. From the director on down to every single actor, it's just who you would want. It's a who's who in the movie making business.
Actually, would you agree that the movie is well cast in general?
Yes. I think I don't think it's as beautiful as a lot of people are saying. It's okay. It's not as beautiful as 2049.
I agree.
I think one of the things that holds it back from being gorgeous is just a lack of any kind of humanity. It's just wide vistas of nothing, and I know that's the planet, but you don't get any sense of why that's important, because even on their home world, it's just empty rooms and brooding Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah, Kaladin is probably the one that I think is maybe the most tragic in that. Because
how are they rich?
You're supposed to set it up being that they're not only rich, but much more importantly, they're beloved by their people. Like they have a very good society.
Their soldiers just chant Atreides. Okay, cool.
Yeah, but they're like soldiers.
Right. Of course they will.
Kind of like doesn't count.
So, but it's a competently made movie.
Yeah.
And with all the hype behind it, with how popular the books are, this had the potential on paper to be one of those movies that goes down in history as one of the best movies of all time, maybe sci-fi movies of all time.
Sure. Yeah.
But the problem is that the story is just not there. And part of it, as you guys have already alluded to, is that it's hard to adapt this material. But I find if you're going to do this, when you make a movie, you have to have characters that people care about. And I know apparently with the book, the characters are kind of a secondary to the plot. But
I would argue that. I think some people would get mad at me for saying that, but I don't really see any other way to look at it, because Herbert's world and all of the stuff that he puts in the book is centered around the political animosity from one group to another. And it's a lot, right? Like it's the again, this kind of Machiavellian machinations of like the House Harkonnen versus Atreides, and the way that Duke Atreides. So like this is a thing that also doesn't come up in the movie, which I was kind of sad about, which is like Leto 100% knows that it's a trap. He has a conversation with Jessica, and I think maybe one sort of with Paul about this in the book, which is like he knows that this is suspicious, and he knows that there's no good reason for the Emperor to have made this switch, and he knows that Harkonnen, because this is an ongoing feud for hundreds of years, he knows that they want him dead, and they knows that they want all of them dead. He goes into this, onto Arrakis, saying, and he kind of says this because there's a moment in the movie where he's like, House Atreides will answer the call or whatever. You know, it kind of does that moment, and that's part of it, right? He's like, part of it is like, I will do what I'm requested of my Emperor, right? But the other part of it, he goes, this is a trap. I know it's a trap, and I'm smarter than Baron Harkonnen. So I'm going to go into this trap, and then I'm going to learn things, and then I'm going to win, basically. You don't get a lot of that. Like, you don't get all of the...
You don't get any of it.
The ins and outs of this.
Nothing.
You know, and you don't really get the ins and outs of Arakeen society, which is like the city that they live in, or there's wealthy people who live in that city. There's people who like run the spice mines. There's people who run the water distillers, and all that kind of stuff. And that's the stuff that for me was the letdown of the movie. Like, I like the movie in general, but like there are things that are missing from it that I think would address many of your complaints.
There's, like I said, there's no grounding in I mean, obviously it's not reality, but you need to have this human aspect of connection.
Let me actually ask you a question about this. I assume you noticed that there was a bull in many shots.
Yeah.
Did you get that? Do you know what that is?
His grandfather fought bulls?
Is that all you got out of it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the kind of thing. This is exactly my point, I think, like of something that gets left out. His grandfather was killed by the bull that's hanging above their...
Did they say that?
They did say it.
Okay.
They did say it at one point. But
I was already kind of in and out by this point.
No, I get it. But the grandfather was actually killed by that bull.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder to Leto to not make stupid moves, basically. Moreover, Jessica and Leto, in one of these scenes that you would get that would actually humanize them and give them a better relationship, they have a whole fight when they get to the planet. They get to Arrakis. First of all, they're on Caladan, and she's like, I don't even know why you packed this stupid bull. Because the actual bull, like the way that they describe it in the book, is it's dirty and bloody. It's covered in his grandfather's blood, and they just sprayed something on it to like just encapsulate it basically and protect it. So like it's not supposed to be a clean, nicely taxidermied bullhead. It's like a gross, bloody, muddy mess of like his grandfather's viscera and stuff. So she absolutely hates this thing, and she does not want it anywhere. She didn't even want it at all, period. And Leto insists. It's the only thing. He's like, Jessica can do whatever she wants with the entire household, but this is the only thing he insists must be in the dining hall. He's like, this has to be front and center wherever I am all the time. And it is because it is this reminder of like, don't be that guy, right?
Yeah.
And of course, that's all like wrapped up in the sense that he is literally like walking into a thing that he knows is a trap. So it's like, don't be that guy. Don't get gored by a bull. And then, poetically,
right.
Metaphorically, he gets gored by a bull.
Yeah.
Like, Baron Harkonnen is dangerous. All of these things. He's trying to murder him. And sorry for the spoiler, but gets murdered by Harkonnen.
So I think this kind of leads to another problem I have is, we are told that Baron Harkonnen is dangerous.
Yeah.
We're never shown that.
No, not a lot.
We're told that he's bad to the Fremen. Mm-hmm. Never really shown that.
Yeah.
There
are a lot of scenes that would help that.
It just loses me. And we talk about on this podcast, show, don't tell. Mm-hmm. And I think this movie did an absolutely terrible job at doing this.
Yeah.
They showed all the wrong things.
I wonder to some extent, because I've heard that there's a really long like we were talking before that there's like some 5-hour cut of this movie. Of course there is, because there's an
There
assembly
always
cut
is,
somewhere.
Yeah.
They put all this stuff together. But I do wonder if a lot of the editing choices were built around what the studio thought was going to be action heavy.
Possibly.
Because it cuts right to the battle, like the army battle, right? Soldiers actually shooting at each other and fist fights.
No, there's no guns.
Well, okay, not actual guns, but like,
That's another thing. It's just stupid.
Yeah.
It's just dumb.
well, they have the shields. You know.
Just do away with it. Make it okay. Oh,
You can't.
gosh.
The shields are like, it's just such a critical part.
Maybe
of
I just don't like Dune.
Maybe you don't. And I
It's
actually kinda get
possible.
it.
It's not for everyone. It's kind of a wild story, and like even though I really enjoyed it, I fully acknowledge that it is not for absolutely everyone.
So when you describe the book,
Yeah.
and the plot, and
Uh-huh.
like all that political stuff, I like
It's
that kind of
super
thing.
intellectual, though.
But you get nothing like that in the movie.
So this is where I actually think the movie is. People talk about the movie being unmakeable, right? They talk about it being like an unfilmable book, or they talk about the book being an unfilmable book. And one of the things I think is interesting about that is I think that, yes, it is a very complicated thing. You've got to set up a lot of interplay between a lot of different people and a lot of different motivations kind of competing with each other. I mean, look, we didn't even, and it is in fact 40 minutes into this, and I want to start wrapping this up. Like we can't, there's not even any chance. Like we talk about Dr. Yue, who gets almost no setup whatsoever in the movie and then suddenly betrays, again, sorry for the spoilers, suddenly betrays Leto. He actually has a really good motivation for doing this. It is very unclear in the movie version. But that's not the only problem. The other problem is the book is so intellectual in terms, I don't mean it's so smart necessarily. There are things that I think are very smart about the book. But what I mean is it is a cerebral story. It is a story about logic and ideas, and it is not a story about feelings. It is not a story about characters like having relationships with each other that are moving or emotional, right? It's just not an emotional book, like really at all, you know? And even you can see this in the way that Herbert gives people superpowers, because all the superpowers are intellectual. You know, you're a, you're an ultra logical human computer, or you have the power of mind control, or you have, all of these kinds of things. You can see into the future, or you can see across space-time, right? Like these are not emotional powers. So it's hard to connect. And I think that that's really the challenge with filming the movie. I liked it because I have a lot of that backstory that I can kind of bring to bear on it. But I kind of get it.
Maybe that's the disconnect. Is what I'm most familiar is the Out of Frame episode that put out, because I haven't read the books, and I had just the 1984 movie. I've seen clips, and I'm not gonna do it. But it's one of those things where you either, I think that you have to, in movies and TV, you have to have characters that people care about. You don't have the books. The books are just a different medium. Yeah. So you have to, I know this is a faithful adaptation and that's what the fans want, but sometimes things just don't translate straight. And they've even, like Lord of the Rings, they made tons of adaptations to the story to make that fit for a movie.
They're mostly small for the most part. They're subtle. I mean, not necessarily small, but subtle in most cases.
But there's, and obviously, they cut stuff out here, but
yeah,
with this, it seems
he also did 12 hours of movie.
We're probably going to get there with this.
I think they're only doing
two parts.
2, but maybe I'm
and
wrong.
This is the other thing. Maybe this is just the wrong medium. Maybe this is an epic TV series.
I've had a lot of people make that point, and I actually generally agree with it. I think it might have been smarter, but
yeah,
here we are. All right, I hate to do this because I actually feel like I'm cutting this really short. Again, but
stop it in the middle of the conversation.
Stop it in the middle of the conversation. But I know Jen has a heart out, and we have to stick around and do some bonus material for our patrons. And so, if you're a supporter on Patreon or Subscribestar, which if you're not, it's patreon.com/outoframeshow or subscribestar.com/outoframeshow. But if you are, stick around. We're going to do some Q&A. If you're not, thank you for listening to and or watching this. If you haven't watched the Out of Frame episode on Dune, that is where I really get into the meat of the ideas in the universe, the economics, the politics, political theory, and honestly what would make the world a heck of a lot better place for most of the people living in it if your name is not Lord Atreides,
and
basically Duke
Atreides. This obviously, working for feed, you kind of take this with a grain of salt, but it's better than the movie, so...
Oh, well.
And also 2 hours shorter.
I'll appreciate that. Actually, I did have somebody say that about an episode recently. It was like...
This is better.
This is better.
Got all I need.
Anyway, all right. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will see you next time.